Today we're going to be talking about the best decks in Legacy, as well as just other decks that you can play, what they're trying to do. But first, we got to address the elephant in the room, and that is the Fantasticar. So let's dive in and talk about basically a handful of decks that you can play if you're trying to run this car. Let's start off with our Doomsday pile. This was the first list that I saw come across my radar when it came to players jamming this Fantasticar. The idea is you're going to cast 4 spells in a turn, you're going to pop it, and you're going to make 4/4/4 flying haste artifacts and just jam them and like OTK style. You also, because of the way that Doomsday works, it's a lot of like cantrippy stuff. Set yourself up. You'll of course try to cast Doomsday and be able to make your pile to win off Thassa's Oracle, because you're going to only have 5 cards left in your library afterward, right? This also has Chase, Wielder of Mystery. This was a list that went 5-0 on MTGO. There's been a couple variations of these list going out for Doomsday pile. I saw a Doomsday pilot kind of talk about it briefly and say the Fantasticar in Doomsday is basically Doomsday on training wheels. You don't necessarily need to know all of the lines and piles that you need to make, because you now have this way to just sort of go, oh, oops, I win. So Fantasticar is definitely a Nadu situation that everybody has kind of determined that this is the best thing to be doing in Legacy. So how do we get to break this? That's the question. And there's at least 5 or 6 different variation decks now that players are doing and jamming this in every list to try to say, is this the most broken thing to do with it? Let's find out here. So this is, of course, the first list that we're talking about here. It's the Doomsday pile. Now we've seen a couple other ones. So let's dive in and see some of the other powerful ones that we can be able to do. So, all right, Mystic Forge Fantasticar. So if you are not familiar with the Mystic Forge, your idea is you're going to be playing cards off the top of your library. You're shredding people with Glowing Flesh Raker. Right? You've got a little bit of protection and removal with Conflict's Command, but it's all these sort of low to the ground, easy to cast stuff. And we just jammed in the Fantasticar because why not? We're already doing this sort of play stuff off the top of our library. And, up to this point, it felt like a big mana deck like Tron, which was the best thing until Candelabra was banned. Now it's like, no, you can get away with doing like this Mystic Forge becoming a little bit better than the Tron variations there. So definitely something to kind of make note of as a different flavor to be able to go for it. We're not going to spend as much time talking about this list as we are other lists later in the video, but wanted to kind of address all these different flavors of Fantasticar that are going around Legacy right now. Next thing around is the Fantasticar Stormchaser's Talent. Now there's a couple variations you could do. Blue-red or blue-black seem to be the go-to way about it, but the idea is you're doing the Stormchaser's Talent, you're doing Boomerang Basics here, so you're able to bounce these and replay them and do that sort of stuff because they're low-cost stuff. And our idea is to Dark Ritual into a Fantasticar because it costs 3 mana. The fact that we can Ritual into it is the really kind of scary thing about this card here. So then we've got a bunch of 0 costs like we've talked about. We have these 1-drops, and it's easy enough to be able to play 4 spells in a turn with this. We've also got a good amount of backup with Daze and Force Will. But yeah, you've seen some red variations with it that might run Corey Steel Cutters, different ways to do about it, but you can kind of see the idea is still the same. How quickly can we get the Fantasticar out and about and go? So that's the Stormchaser Talent variation of it. We've also got our Mono Black Saga style. Now, this is, of course, utilizing Urza's Saga to help us be able to get some of our 0-cost artifacts out, because it is basically 0-cost deck. Lotus Petal, Mishra's Bauble, Mox Opals, Urza's Bauble, and, of course, the One Ring to kind of help us out here. Fantastic cards in here, and then it's just all rituals all the time. We're utilizing Dark Ritual, Cabal Ritual, Disruption is in here. Removal spells. It's a very fast and scary deck. You can see 9 lands. That's all it needs, which is wild to think about. So if you want to go fast, this is one of the flavors you can go for. Then we've got our Dimir Murktide. So utilizing a little bit of a Murktide action here. So just sort of like I'm doing my normal Murktide game plan. All right, I've got the cantrips, we've got Ponder, we've got Flow State, we've got Brainstorm, but also I've got Ritual, Fantasticar, and then it just can sit there and wait for me to drop my 0 cost, do my cantripy stuff. And if you have an answer for that, guess what? I've got my, plan B, Murktide Reagent, Burrogoyf, do the sort of bigger threats that way. So this one of course, was a list that got second place at the Legacy Challenge there. Also, there's been a bunch of national events that took place, and I know there was at least three Fantasticar decks that made the top 8 at the Impact Gaming's event that they did. So, all right, and then this is the list that I'm going to be testing out very soon. This is the mono blue variation of Affnity. There's also like the Is It Affnity versions too that are running around, but I like the mono blue style of it, utilizing Kappa Cannoneer, stuff like that. But again, it's very similar to the Saga list you saw of a lot of 0-drop stuff that is set up here, right? And then we've got just kind of the bigger top end stuff that we can go, and a little bit of protection with Force of Wills and things like that. So, you know, if you're going to be playing Legacy, you have to be aware that the car is driving around and causing some problems and some havoc there. And it is a Nadu situation of should I play a Fantasticar deck, or should I be the one trying to beat the deck? And in that situation, we saw that it was better to just be on Nadu than not. And I think that's what we're seeing from a lot of the players, basically going, we're going to turn all of our decks into this Fantasticar deck because it's the best thing to do right now. So let's kind of dive in and talk a little bit about other decks that you can see in Legacy that aren't using the Fantasticar, or other strategies that you can expect to see once this gets banned. We know it's going to happen. We know it's going to get banned. It's a Nadu situation. It's going to be a month, 2 months. Who knows how long before Wizard acts, but we know that it is going to be a situation where Fantasticar will get banned in Legacy. It will get banned in Vintage. So it is definitely a problem in these external formats. And part of it, I think, is the casting cost. Maybe if it was costed a little bit more, they came out and they even said that this was a mistake. It should have cost 4. Even if it was costing 4, I don't know if that's maybe it wouldn't be in every deck, but it would definitely still be as powerful because of the ability in external formats, or eternal formats, that is, to be able to generate all these 0-cost stuff so quickly here. But let's jump in and talk about some of the other decks in Legacy here. How's everyone doing? NanMan here, and we're going to be talking Legacy today. We're going to be diving into the meta because we just finished up commentary and casting the Four Seasons Legacy event. We had 2 days of Legacy, both the Italian Championship as well as the Four Seasons Spring event. And so the Legacy for the Italian Championship Invitational that they had 64 players. Lots of different decks were showcased. The top 8 had 8 different decks. We just had the Four Seasons Spring event, which had 333 players, and the top 8 had 8 different decks as well. So the meta in Legacy is all over the place. There's so many cool decks, and it really rewards players that have put in the work. And we're going to dive in and take a look. I'm over here showing off our Mox field, and we're going to highlight a couple of decks to kind of keep an eye out for in Legacy in the meta, especially as we're going to start bringing up a little bit more Legacy coverage here on the channel as our LGS starts getting into more Legacy content. But let's dive in. Next up in our big mana style decks, well, not really big mana, but land focus decks is going to be land. So let's dive in. There's 2 different ones that we're going to highlight here. We've got our green-white version here, which, if you're not familiar with lands is a kind of combination hybrid deck that's control/combo, which you might be thinking of, how can it be both? It's control because of the toolboxiness that the lands are in the list. It runs 34 lands. That tends to be the kind of the go-to number that it runs. Some might run 1 or more, 1 or less, depending on how it goes. But the idea of it is you can control based off of what you're doing with your land. So let's start with that side of things and then go in with what tools you have to supplement it. Of course, the combo that exists is utilizing Dark Depths. Right? If you use that with Thespian Stage, you can be able to sit here and just sort of combo off and go. Of course, Thespian Stage, pay 2, tap it, becomes a copy of target land. So Dark Depths does have this ability. It is a legendary snow land that enters with 10 counters. When all those counters are removed, you create a 20/20 black avatar, indestructible flying creature. So that is kind of the way that it's set up by sitting here and making a copy. They're both legendary. Get rid of the one without counters. Oh, this one no longer has counters. You sack it. Now you have your 20/20 and you just sort of one-shot somebody, right? There's the combo element. The control-y element are things like our Wastelands, our Caracas here, our Maze of Ith, our Blast Zone, our Bajuka Bog, our Pasejus, these utility lands that we're able to utilize and set ourselves up. Oh, you're trying to attack me with a creature? Well, I'll use Maze of Ith and phase it out and basically absorb that hit because it's now exiled, comes back untapped, don't actually take damage. You're trying to play legendary creatures? Well, let's just bounce it back to your hand, and I'm controlling the battlefield to set myself up for that combo. We're going to be able to kind of spin our wheels a bit getting to that with things like exploration, generating more and more mana, playing multiple lands a turn, Mox Diamond, being able to kind of sneak our way in and accelerate ourselves out ahead of our opponents, and you're going to be trying to set yourself up and protect yourself, same sort of way you would protect yourself with a Tron list, utilizing things like Pithing Needle, Disruptor Flute, stuff like that to kind of set yourself up for success. There are loops that you're able to do, utilizing things like Life of the Loam. All right, you're able to dump things into your graveyard, oftentimes lands, because there's so many lands in the list, and then you're going to be able to bring them back. You can loop Wasteland and lock people out. You can loop Ghost Quarter and lock people out, especially when you get to play Exploration and you're playing multiple lands a turn. So you can say, boom, Wasteland your Volcanic Island, Wasteland your Underground Seas, the things that you need for your very specific mana, and now I'm going to do it multiple times and keep you in check that way. So very powerful in the way that kind of sets itself up here. The green-white version that we see here utilizes oftentimes some spells to kind of help it out. Usually that's the Swords to Plowshares, that sort of element to kind of help it out. Crop Rotation helps us cheat our lands into play. So utilizing very specific cards to go that way. You can go Gruul as well, and then that gives you access to a couple of other tools. Minx and Boo is one of those very powerful planeswalker. If you guys have played Legacy, you might have seen him running around, but more likely than not, if you've played Vintage Cube, you've seen him running around because Minx and Boo wins games in Vintage Cube. All right, very powerful, creates the hamster, sends it in, haste, trample, gets very scary. This list was testing out the Vibrance, a little bit of Lightning Bolt action, a little bit of Tutor action for a land, so that we talked about how important those lands are. That's kind of the additions for it. Also, the sideboard will be very much dependent based off the colors that you go for here. We didn't spend very much time talking about it, but that is another little bit of elements. Another land to highlight here is this Tabernacle. Now, this is a very expensive card in paper. You might see this list run up a lot more online than you do in paper. Same sort of deal with the Tron list because of the Candelabras, but this is really good against those aggro strategies that might exist that is creating a lot of creatures, like the Cradle Control list, things like that that are going to be going wide with a lot of creatures, and now it's going to be taxing them. You're going to have to pay 1 mana per each creature on the battlefield, and when we don't really have a lot of creatures, that doesn't really hurt us. So that's a really powerful utility land that players can utilize here. But that's our lands list. Let's kind of dive into and take a look at some of the other lists that you might be able to see in Legacy. Shifting gear away from our lands focused decks, in a way, we have a very important land in this next one. We're going into our creature list and starting off with our Cradle Control style of decks, and we've got one to showcase off here. This is kind of the Golgari, kind of the most consistent normal shell that you might be able to see. A couple different flavors of that Cradle Control that you might pop up and see on leagues, in your locals, whatever you might see. But let's talk a little bit about what the deck is trying to do. You can kind of get a good snapshot and picture based off of the land count and the creature count that we've got, and you could see 23 lands but 22 creatures, so it's pretty much even split here, because we do have some utility lands like before, things like our Wasteland, our Caracas, Cradle, as well as our Talon Gates. So there are some really powerful lands. Our idea here is to be able to utilize our white of the Reliquary here. Of course, it gets +1/+1 for each creature card in your graveyard. There's quite a bit of the creatures there. Sack another creature, search for a land, put it onto the battlefield there. You've got things like Keen-Eyed Curator, our, of course, Cub here to generate a bunch of things, both Badger Mole and our Scythe Cat's Cub. So utilizing these smaller creatures here, Landfall, putting +1 counters on stuff, Badger Mole Cub, of course, putting +1 counters on our lands, being able to tap and generate a lot of mana, utilizing Icy Till to continue this sort of loop going through and generating a bunch of resources that we can be able to utilize to help us take over the game and go for almost this go wide, generate a lot of mana and be able to kind of get some good payouts here. We've got things like Green Sun Zenith to help us tutor for some stuff. Life of the Loam also in here to help us get back our Wastelands, or if they were able to Wasteland our Cradles, we have ways to kind of help get those back there. Of course, Mox Diamond
is a great way to kind of ramp out our strategy and get ourselves set up here. But you'll notice we're not running any blue here, so we do have kind of a very specific strategy and tools at our disposal to kind of help us out here. One in particular I'm a big fan of. I know we try not to spend too much time on the sideboard, but Choke, love to see it here in Legacy. But yeah, if you want a kind of creature-focused deck, this is the way to be able to go about it. Elvish Reclaimer, also a really good one here because you are able to continue to kind of get these bigger creatures out there and be able to find those lands that you are needing to help you out to be able to win the game there. So if you're looking for a creature-focused deck that also cares about some lands, this might be a good one to check out here. But let's go in and see a couple of the other creature-focused decks that we've got. Legacy Dredge. This was the first place deck of the 4 season spring event. Now, if you know, you made basically the 9 rounds of Swiss, and then the cup to top 8, whoever had the best record was able to get first place, and it was a Dredge this time around. So again, another one of those lists that if you are familiar with Modern, some of these cards might look a little bit familiar. You might be able to see some of the tools that we got to be able to see, especially like Stinkweed Imp, Golgari Thug as the main dredging cards that exist in Modern. Golgari Grave Troll, the only card to be banned twice in Modern here, not allowed to be played in Modern, but definitely useful here in Legacy. One of the best dredge creatures there is, because you can dredge 6. Now, the idea behind this deck is you're going to be filling your graveyard with all of these creatures, going to be utilizing things like Anger. You're going to be to help give your creatures haste. You're going to be utilizing Hogak to be able to continually put some pressure because it is an 8/8 with Trample. Another really good one here is our Pox Walkers here. So whenever you cast a spell from anywhere other than your hand, you get to return this from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. Right? We've got the Narcomoebas here. So you've got a lot of little like setup here. You're going to start to go and be able to kind of take over the board a lot with these creatures. And you've got things like an Ashen Rider as well. This little bit of exiling a permanent can be super useful and super powerful here. A lot of these spells that we've got are basically designed to help get us set up to that point, because we're going to be going wide with our Bridge from the Below, right? We're generating all of these 2/2 zombies and all of the shenanigans that we're doing. So it is one of those super powerful graveyard hate decks. Depending on how much graveyard hate exists, this deck does better or worse. Also, the pilot of the deck is one that is going to be doing better at the tournaments if they have the experience with it. Right, Dredge Return is really good for being able to bring back one of our scary creatures, like in this case, Ashen Rider would be a great one because we can sack some of our other creatures to be able to do it. So very powerful, very fast. You notice a very short, low to the ground land count, 14 here. And our Lion's Eye Diamonds is great for this list because our goal is, I've dredged all these creatures into the graveyard. I've brought them back to my hand. What am I going to do? How am I going to get them back in there? Well, we've got a bunch of spells to help us with this. Faithless Looting, Careful Studies, things like that. And then we can be able to generate more mana off the Lion's Eye Diamond. So very fast, very powerful creature-focused deck that you have to kind of keep an eye out for in Legacy. But there's a couple more to be able to see. So let's jump over to our Death and Taxes list. Death and Taxes really has 2 flavors after the 4 Seasons weekend. This is the most common, most used flavor, if you will, and that is the black-white version here. So you get utilizing things like, of course, Overlord of the Baelmark, Emperor of the Bones, dump things into the graveyard, bring them back. Recursion is so much of the game plan when it comes to Death and Taxes. It's how can we keep utilizing our tools again and again and slowly tax and strain our opponent on their resources here. Those are the black sources we got. The idea is to continually get those resources for ourselves with things like Recruiter of the Guard, things like Stoneforge Mystic, right? Things like Flicker Wisp. Felia, we're able to kind of reuse our tools again and again, and a lot of that really comes down to this pre-war formalware, being able to return creatures from our graveyard to get these ETB effects a second, third, fourth time. We're cheating on resources by utilizing things like Aether Vials. We're disrupting our opponent with things like Disruptor Flute, Meteor Sword, and of course, big removal with the Swords to Plowshares. Black also gives us access to Thoughtseize to disrupt our opponent. So it's a bit of this, I'm trying to draw this game out as long as possible. We'll grind it out and eventually take over the board with my creatures and just put too much pressure. A lot of the commentators for 4 Seasons talked about it as a constrictor deck. We're going to slowly tighten our grasp around this game and deplete your resources to the point that my advantage from this engine that I've generated is enough to be able to get there here. So we've of course got our Wastelands to help us out, our Caracas to help us out. So it's got a lot of tools. Sideboard is pretty useful. Another thing to note is this Euron that is in here. That is a companion that is allowed for Legacy. So you are able to do some Euron loops here with this, because you can be able to bring this in. If you have something like a Flicker Wisp as well, you can be able to constantly loop them, right? Euron will come in, blink everything out of existence. Those things will come back. And if you have a Flicker Wisp, it'll blink Euron out of existence. And then you can kind of just keep sitting here and going back and forth between those to really set yourself up between this kind of go, 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 blink, 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 and just, again, ETB, let's have my Solitude, exile your thing. Let's have my Recruiter, tutor up this threat that I need. Let's have my Stoneforge, go find this other equipment. And you just sort of go, 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 go. So very powerful. It is a good deck for people that want to be able to grind it out. You're looking for a grindy deck, this is definitely one to go for here. It's one that's been around for a very long time. So that is our black-white version, but let's talk about the green-white version that was making a bit of a splash at the Four Seasons event, because our player that was piloting this not only made top 8, they got second at the Italian Invitational Legacy Championship with the 64 players, the best Legacy players in Italy, playing it out on Saturday. But they also made top 8 on Sunday for the 333 player Four Seasons spring event. So this was awesome to be able to see. We showcased it on the stream for you guys, but the idea of it is very similar to the other one. We're not utilizing black anymore, so our disruption method is a little bit different, because we're going more into this idea of White Orchid Phantom. We're having these flyers, the disruptors this way. We're having Thalia again, Esper Sentinel to get advantage. You notice that a lot of the lists are not running Esper Sentinels anymore, because we found ways to kind of utilize other tools. But this list is okay with it, because we have this enchantment known as Birthing Ritual. I can turn my 1-drop into a 2-drop. I can turn my 2-drop into a 3-drop, my 3-drop into a 4-drop, and so on and so forth. We can also turn our 2-drop into a 2-drop, right? The idea is you're looking at top 7 cards at the end of your turn. You can pick a creature card that costs 1 or less than, 1 more than what you've sacrificed. So you can look at the 7, say, I found something that I'm interested in. I found this Recruiter of the Guard. Do I have a 3 or a 2-drop? Sweet. I will replace it now with this Recruiter of the Guard. So it's a great way to sort of generate advantage and kind of do that Constrictor style, because you have so many tools to kind of drag the game out. Again, same idea with the pre-war formalware, with the Meteor Swords, Disruptor Flute, Swords to Plowshare. You'll notice that the package that is the taxes list is more or less the same across the board. It's just what sort of flavors. One big one is this Gaddock Teed, helping you out, making non-creature spells with X in their mana value not be able to cast. And then, of course, non-creature spells with converted mana cost 4 or greater can't be cast. In a world of Force of Will, that just shuts it down completely. So very powerful and very useful in the Legacy right now. So definitely a very cool list. You can see even the 4 ley lines. This way that the sideboard is, it's set up for very specific matchups. So that's something we're not going to spend as much time talking about the sideboard, more talking about the main board. But also the Euron loops exist in this as well here. So very cool with the Death and Taxes list. But thanks for tuning in and watching the first episode, everybody. We will be diving into the aggro and combo decks in the next episode, so make sure you're staying tuned for that. But that's going to do it for this one. Thanks for tuning and watching, and I'll see you all next game.